The State and Revolution, Vladimir Lenin, 1917. Vladimir Lenin's The State and Revolution is one of the most influential Marxist treatises on the nature of the state, revolution, and the transition to socialism. Written during the turbulent months of 1917, between the February and October revolutions in Russia, Lenin's work is both a theoretical clarification and a practical guide to revolutionary action. In it, Lenin revisits the teachings of Marx and Engels, reasserting their ideas against both reformist distortions and anarchist misinterpretations. Number 1. The state as a product of class antagonisms. Lenin begins by explaining the origins of the state. Drawing directly from Marx and Engels, particularly the Communist Manifesto and the origin of the family, private property, and the state, Lenin asserts that the state arises where, and insofar as, class antagonisms cannot be reconciled. It is an instrument for the oppression of one class by another. In capitalist societies, the state serves the bourgeoisie. In feudal societies, it served the nobility. According to Lenin, the state is not a neutral body that stands above society to mediate interests, but a special body of armed men, such as police and armies, dedicated to maintaining the dominance of the ruling class. He criticizes bourgeois democracy, which, while seemingly inclusive, actually masks the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie behind democratic forms. Number 2. Critique of opportunism and the distortion of Marxism. Lenin spends considerable effort criticizing the opportunists within the socialist movement, particularly figures like Karl Kautsky, who, according to Lenin, diluted the revolutionary core of Marxism to fit a reformist agenda. These opportunists argued that socialism could be achieved through gradual reforms within existing state structures. Against this, Lenin insists that Marxism is revolutionary and that the existing state machinery cannot simply be taken over and used by the proletariat. Instead, the old bourgeois state must be smashed and replaced with a new proletarian state, serving as a transitional form toward the eventual abolition of all states. 3. The dictatorship of the proletariat. Central to the state and revolution is Lenin's concept of the dictatorship of the proletariat. Following Marx, Lenin asserts that after the working class overthrows the bourgeoisie, a transitional state must be established to suppress the resistance of the overthrown classes and to organize the economic and social basis for a classless society. This dictatorship is not the dictatorship of an individual or a small elite, but the rule of the vast majority, the workers, over a tiny minority, the former exploiters. Lenin points to the Paris Commune of 1871 as an example of this in practice. Workers directly elected delegates with immediate recall rights, and officials received no higher wages than an ordinary worker. Number 4. The withering away of the state. One of Lenin's most famous discussions in The State and Revolution concerns the eventual withering away of the state. Under socialism, when class distinctions begin to fade, the coercive functions of the state will diminish. Ultimately, in communist society, where there are no classes and no exploitation, the state will no longer be necessary and will wither away. Lenin emphasizes that this process cannot happen immediately after a proletarian revolution. First, the working class must use its state to suppress the bourgeoisie and defend the revolution. Only after achieving economic and social equality will the conditions arise for the gradual disappearance of the state apparatus. Number 5. Democracy in the transition period. Lenin discusses how democracy itself will change in the transition to socialism. Under capitalism, even the freest bourgeois republics are in fact dictatorships of the bourgeoisie. In the early stage of socialism, there will be a dictatorship of the proletariat, but it will be a democracy for the majority, the workers, and repression only for the minority, the capitalists. This workers' democracy would be far more complete and participatory than bourgeois democracy. It would involve mass participation in governance, with mechanisms like direct elections, delegates who can be recalled at any time, and measures to prevent bureaucratic privileges. However, as communism develops, even this proletarian democracy will wither away, because governance over people will be replaced by administration of things and the management of production processes. 6. The Paris Commune as a model. The Paris Commune serves as a historical model throughout Lenin's work. He praises its structural innovations, such as the abolition of a standing army and the replacement of bureaucratic institutions with directly elected councils, emphasizes that the lessons of the commune must be understood and applied. The state apparatus must not be taken over intact. Instead, it must be destroyed and replaced with institutions that are radically democratic and proletarian in nature. 7. Polemic against anarchism. While Lenin agrees with anarchists that the state must ultimately disappear, he sharply criticizes them for rejecting the need for a transitional proletarian state. He argues that anarchists are naive to believe that the bourgeoisie can be overthrown without organized coercion. Without a proletarian state, the working class would be vulnerable to counter-revolution. Thus, Lenin insists on a dialectical approach. The state must be used temporarily as an instrument of proletarian dictatorship, but must also be consciously organized to ensure its own eventual demise. 8. The role of the vanguard party. Though not the main focus of the state and revolution, Lenin's concept of the revolutionary vanguard underpins much of his argument. The working class, to succeed in smashing the bourgeois state and establishing its own rule, must be led by a revolutionary party that embodies the most advanced political consciousness of the proletariat. The vanguard party must guide the workers in both revolutionary struggle and in constructing the institutions of proletarian power after victory. Number 9. Incomplete nature of the work. It is important to note that the state and revolution was left unfinished. Lenin intended to write further chapters discussing concrete measures for constructing socialism, but the events of the October Revolution and the subsequent Civil War drew him away from theoretical writing and into practical leadership. Nonetheless, the text remains a powerful and influential statement of Marxist theory regarding the state and revolution. 10. Impact and legacy. The State and Revolution became a foundational document for Soviet political theory and for many other communist movements around the world. It shaped the political practice of the Bolsheviks after their seizure of power in October 1917 and justified the creation of the Soviet state. However, critics later argued that Lenin's interpretation contributed to the establishment of a highly centralized authoritarian system in the Soviet Union, far removed from the direct democracy he described. Some suggest that while Lenin envisioned a temporary dictatorship of the proletariat, in practice, this led to a dictatorship of the party over the proletariat. Regardless of these criticisms, the State and Revolution continues to be regarded as a classic of revolutionary theory, an essential text for understanding Marxist views on the state and a potent call for revolutionary transformation.